Have you ever had the creeping sense that no matter how much space you try to create in your life, how much quiet, how much stillness, it's never truly enough? That there's always this invisible pressure humming beneath the surface? Like you're being pulled in 100 directions, not by people but by invisible expectations? If so, you're not imagining it. And more importantly, you're not alone. We live in a world that has become addicted to noise. Not just literal sound, but mental clutter. We fill every spare moment with something. Scrolling, clicking, swiping, watching, reacting. There's an unspoken belief that if you're not constantly doing something, you're falling behind. That rest is laziness. That stillness is emptiness. But the deeper truth is, we're not afraid of boredom. We're afraid of being alone with ourselves. And it makes sense. When the world quiets down, all the unresolved questions start rising to the surface. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Why do I feel like something's missing, even when everything looks fine on the outside? The discomfort isn't the silence. It's what the silence reveals. But instead of facing those questions, we bury them. Under work, under social media, under distractions that give us temporary relief but no lasting peace. This is why some people fear solitude, not because they dislike being alone, but because solitude strips away the illusion. In solitude, there's no one left to impress. No algorithm to guide your attention. Just you and the raw, unfiltered contents of your mind. That's terrifying for a lot of us, because deep down, we're not sure we like who we are when there's no audience. And so, society gives us 1,000 ways to stay busy. We celebrate hustle. We glorify productivity. We frame burnout as a badge of honor. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet epidemic of emptiness. People achieving more than ever before and feeling more hollow than ever before. Why? Because when your life becomes a performance, your identity becomes fragile. You're constantly adapting to what others want, what gets rewarded, what looks good. You start losing touch with your own voice. And eventually, you realize you don't even know what you think anymore, only what you're supposed to think. This is why so many people feel anxious even in moments of success. Because if the version of you that's being praised isn't the real you, the applause feels like it's meant for someone else. And the more you build a life around being who you think you should be, the more disconnected you feel from who you actually are. But here's the twist. The very thing we're running from, inner stillness, is the only thing that can reconnect us to ourselves. Stillness isn't the absence of motion. It's the presence of clarity. But clarity doesn't come cheap. It requires discomfort. It requires sitting with uncertainty. It requires asking questions you might not be ready to answer. Questions like, why do I chase certain goals? Who am I when no one's watching? What parts of me have I silenced in order to be accepted? Most people don't want to go there. Not because they're weak, but because they've been conditioned to believe that self-worth is found in external validation, not internal understanding. That success is measured by how much you can show, not how much you can feel. That happiness is something you achieve by doing more, not something you uncover by doing less. This is where it starts to hurt, where the friction begins. The moment you try to slow down, you'll start to notice just how fast the world is spinning around you. And people will start to notice you're not moving at the same pace. You'll get called unmotivated, unambitious, different. And that word, different, isn't always meant as a compliment. Because when you stop playing by the rules of performance, you stop making other people comfortable. You remind them of what they've buried. You reflect back their own disconnection. And that reflection? It's threatening. But what if the discomfort is the point? What if feeling lost, confused, even empty, isn't a sign that something's wrong, but that something real is trying to surface? There's a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance, the tension between who we think we are and who we actually are. Most people deal with this tension by adjusting the story, not the self. They rewrite their narrative to fit their choices instead of questioning the choices themselves. But deep thinkers, those who sit with the discomfort, they don't rewrite. They examine. And that examination, that inner confrontation, is what separates clarity from conformity. This is why deep self-awareness can feel like both a gift and a burden. Because once you see, you can't unsee. You can't unsee the ways we lie to ourselves to keep life simple. You can't unsee how often success is just a socially acceptable form of avoidance. You can't unsee the pain beneath people's smiles. And here's where the paradox begins. The more clearly you see, the more disconnected you can feel. Not because you've become arrogant or aloof, but because clarity is isolating in a world built on illusion. Most conversations aren't built for depth. Most environments don't reward introspection. We're told to be open, but not too open. To be honest, but only in ways that won't make others uncomfortable. To be authentic, as long as it fits the brand. So, what do you do when your mind starts craving more than the world is ready to give? When surface-level small talk leaves you feeling unseen? When "how are you" doesn't feel like a question, it feels like a script? This is where many people start to withdraw, not because they hate others, but because they no longer feel safe being real around them. And yet, the loneliness that follows isn't a symptom of failure. It's often a side effect of growth. When you outgrow the noise, silence becomes both a friend and a test. Because silence doesn't just reveal, it reshapes. The more time you spend in it, the more you start to see what actually matters. You notice the difference between connection and distraction, between passion and performance, between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. But not everyone will understand this shift. Some will see your withdrawal as weakness. Others will call it arrogance. Because when you stop playing the same games, it looks like you've stopped playing altogether. You haven't. You've just realized the prize isn't worth the price. The moment you stop chasing what doesn't nourish you, there's this strange void that opens up. It feels like freedom, but also like falling. Like suddenly, the ground you were standing on was never solid to begin with. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe the structure of our modern lives, built on comparison, projection, and constant consumption, was never meant to hold the weight of real selfhood. Because the truth is, most of us never learned how to just be. We were taught how to perform, how to compete, how to climb, but not how to sit in silence and actually meet ourselves. Not how to hold space for our own uncertainty without rushing to fix it. We mistake productivity for purpose and attention for connection. But when all the noise fades, the question that remains isn't, "What am I doing?" It's, "Who am I doing this for?" And this is where a deeper kind of grief begins to surface. Not the grief of losing something external, but of realizing how much of your life has been shaped by everything except you. Expectations, social norms, childhood programming, unspoken rules, silent pressures. You start to notice how many of your decisions were made not from desire, but from fear. Fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, fear of missing out. And you wonder, if I strip all that away, what's left? That question doesn't have an immediate answer. And it's not supposed to, because the journey back to your real self isn't a straight line. It's a slow unraveling, a gradual peeling away of everything false. And each layer hurts. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because letting go of an old identity always feels like dying. People rarely talk about that part. The emotional violence of healing. The disorientation of waking up to truths that make your past self look like a stranger. It's not glamorous. It's not always peaceful. Sometimes it's rage. Sometimes it's shame. Sometimes it's a quiet ache that follows you even into your dreams. Because when you stop numbing, everything hurts more at first. But the pain isn't a problem. It's a process. Your mind isn't breaking. It's detoxing. flushing out all the lies it had to believe in order to survive. This is why growth can feel like madness. You start questioning things that used to feel obvious. Your career path, your values, your relationships, your desires. You begin to see that much of what you once wanted was never yours. It was inherited. And reclaiming your own voice means being willing to disappoint those who benefited from your silence. That might be the hardest part. Not the solitude, not the confusion, but the confrontation. The realization that staying true to yourself might mean losing things you thought were permanent. Friends, titles, roles, familiar comforts. It's a high cost. But there's also something sacred about it. Because for the first time, you're not living by default. You're choosing. And that choice, that conscious, painful, intentional choice, is what turns survival into transformation. Still, it's lonely. Let's not pretend it isn't. Being awake in a world that encourages sleepwalking is isolating. You'll see things others ignore, feel things others numb, want things that don't make sense to the crowd. And the more you step into that awareness, the more you'll feel the tension between your inner world and the outer one. But that tension isn't a sign to go back. It's a signal that you're alive, that you're no longer anesthetized by comfort, that you're choosing clarity over convenience. And yet, there will be moments where you doubt all of it, where you wonder if ignorance really was bliss, where you look at people who never ask the big questions and envy their lightness. But that lightness often comes at a cost, too. It's just hidden beneath the surface. And you'll realize you weren't cursed with depth. You were chosen for it. The world doesn't reward this kind of depth, at least not right away. It doesn't throw parades for introspection. It rewards conformity, noise, speed, certainty. It's designed to keep you running in circles, buying, consuming, reacting. Because stillness doesn't sell. Silence doesn't trend. Thoughtfulness isn't content. That's why your growth will often go unnoticed. And why your value can't come from visibility. The most important shifts in your life, the ones that actually change you, won't come with applause. They'll come in quiet, private moments, in tears shed alone, in boundaries set without drama, in truths whispered to yourself at 2 a.m. That's where real transformation happens, in the dark, where no one's watching. So if you feel unseen in your healing, keep going. If your depth is misunderstood, let it be misunderstood. If your clarity is met with resistance, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're shedding. Real growth looks like loss before it looks like liberation. But here's what they don't tell you. The more you embrace that discomfort, the more you become immune to the approval you used to crave. You stop needing to be liked, because you've started liking who you are. You stop needing validation, because you've started validating your own experience. You stop chasing belonging in spaces that require you to shrink. And slowly, very slowly, you begin to find your people. Not the ones who fit your old self, but the ones who meet you where you really are. People who don't just tolerate your depth, but crave it. People who don't flinch when you speak from the soul. People who don't need you to be anything other than everything you already are. They exist, but they're rare, and they're usually hiding in the same silence you had to walk through. That's the irony. Only by embracing your loneliness can you find the kind of connection that doesn't feel like compromise. And it doesn't have to be a crowd. It's not about quantity. It's about resonance. A single conversation with someone who gets it can be more healing than 100 shallow friendships. That's the kind of intimacy deep thinkers need, not more people, just the right people. But finding them starts with being real. And being real starts with being real with yourself. Once you strip away the performance, once you sit in the silence long enough to hear your own voice, the question becomes, what now? You've left the noise behind, or at least, you've stopped letting it control you. You've begun to see through the illusions, the social games, the shallow affirmations. You're awake. But what do you do with that? That's where the real work begins. Awareness without direction can become its own kind of prison. You see what's broken in yourself, in others, in the systems we all live in, but you're not always sure how to fix it, or if it even can be fixed. You realize that most people aren't evil or shallow by choice. They're just afraid. Afraid of truth. Afraid of change. Afraid of losing what little certainty they've clung to. So they double down on what's comfortable, even if it's killing them slowly. This is where cynicism creeps in. The temptation to give up, to retreat completely, to conclude that nothing will ever change, that most people don't want to wake up, and that the world is too far gone. And maybe you're right. Maybe most people won't change. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Your clarity doesn't entitle you to escape. If anything, it gives you a responsibility. Not to fix the world, not to preach, not to prove anything, but to embody the truth you've uncovered. To live it. Not just when it's convenient or praised, but when it's lonely, when it's misunderstood, when no one else claps. Because if your insights don't shape how you treat others, how you love, how you listen, how you move through life, then what are they for? You don't need to be a guru. You don't need a following. You just need to stop hiding. Stop minimizing your depth to make other people comfortable. Stop pretending to care about things you don't. Stop silencing your insights because you fear they're too much. That's how truth dies. Not in censorship, but in self-abandonment. And yet, there's a delicate balance to strike. Because being awake doesn't mean being superior. Awareness without humility becomes arrogance. Insight without compassion becomes cruelty. It's easy to resent the world for not seeing what you see, but resentment is just another form of ego. Real wisdom makes you softer, not harder. It opens your heart, even as it sharpens your mind. So if you find yourself drifting into bitterness, pull yourself back. Remember, people aren't asleep to spite you. They're asleep because it hurts to wake up. Because facing yourself is terrifying. Because the moment you see clearly, you can't hide behind excuses anymore. You have to change. And change, even when it's beautiful, is brutal. This is why your empathy must evolve with your awareness. It's not enough to see through illusions. You have to see through people's pain too. The loudest ones? Often the most scared. The most reactive? Often the most wounded. The ones who attack your depth? Often the ones who fear their own. So yes, protect your peace, protect your space. But don't close your heart. Don't confuse detachment with numbness. Real strength isn't the ability to cut people off. It's the ability to stay open, even when you've been hurt. To love without illusion. To speak truth without ego. To be present, even when you're misunderstood. Because one day, someone will hear your words and feel less alone. Not because you gave them answers, but because your honesty gave them permission to be honest too. That's how change spreads. Not through force, but through resonance. Not by being the loudest voice in the room, but by being the most grounded. And the more you live this way, the more you'll notice something subtle but profound. The world doesn't feel as hostile. Not because it changed, but because you did. You stopped expecting understanding from everyone. You stopped needing validation to trust your own path. You stopped fighting every battle and started choosing which ones were worth your energy. That's peace. Not the kind that's passive or naive. The kind that comes from seeing clearly and still choosing to love. Still choosing to try. Still choosing to be here. And this, maybe, is what all that discomfort was preparing you for. Not to escape the world, but to re-enter it. Wiser, quieter, more aligned. You become someone who doesn't just see through illusions, but who creates spaces where others can see clearly too. Through your presence, your example, your honesty. Because that's the paradox. The more deeply you understand the human condition, the more compassion you feel for those trapped in it. the more clearly you see the systems, the stories, the distractions, the more you realize we're all just trying to cope, to make sense of things, to find meaning. And maybe, just maybe, your pain can help others find theirs. Not through preaching, not through perfection, but through presence. Through staying with the questions long enough that others feel safe to ask their own. This is where your path leads. Not to applause, not to certainty, but to a life lived from the inside out. A life shaped by real questions, real values, real connection. And maybe that's rare. Maybe it's not always easy, but it's real. And in a world drowning in performance, real is the most revolutionary thing you can be. So if you've felt out of place, if you've questioned everything, if you've been labeled too sensitive, too intense, too much, know this: you're not broken. You're just awake in a world that's still sleeping. Keep thinking, keep feeling, keep going. And if you're still here, still watching, still listening, thank you. You're the reason this matters. If this spoke to something inside you, share it. Leave a comment. Let others know they're not alone either. And if you want to keep going deeper with us, hit subscribe. This isn't the end. It's where it hurts, but also where it begins.